There's a quiet kind of person you've probably met at some point in your life. They don't complain much. They rarely ask for help. And when something difficult happens, something that would shake most people, they just absorb it. They keep going. From the outside, they look strong, remarkably composed. But here's the thing. That composure often isn't strength in the way we usually mean it. It's something else. Today, we're going to talk about the psychology of people who have endured too much. What happens inside the mind and body when a person absorbs more pain, more stress, more hardship than the human system was ever designed to carry. Because the patterns that emerge from that kind of experience are fascinating and deeply human, and they explain a lot of behavior that the world often misreads. Let's start with the brain. When a person goes through repeated stress or prolonged hardship, not just one difficult event, but a sustained accumulation of them, the nervous system begins to adapt. And adaptation sounds like a good thing. In many ways, it is. But the brain doesn't always adapt in ways that serve us long term. Research in neuroscience has shown that chronic stress reshapes the brain's threat detection system. The amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for processing fear and danger, becomes hyperactive. It starts scanning the environment constantly, looking for the next threat, the next problem, the next thing that could go wrong. Meanwhile, the prefrontal cortex, which handles rational thinking, future planning, and emotional regulation, gets slightly suppressed. The brain essentially shifts from a long-term thinking mode to a survival mode, not because the person chose it, because the brain learned it was necessary. Now, here's what makes this interesting. People who have been through a great deal often develop something that looks, on the surface, like emotional toughness. They seem unbothered, unshakable even. But cognitive psychologists make an important distinction between genuine emotional regulation and emotional suppression. Emotional regulation means you feel something, you process it, and you move through it. Suppression means you feel something and you push it down, because somewhere along the way, you learned that expressing it wasn't safe, or wasn't useful, or simply wasn't an option. And the tricky part, suppression looks like resilience. From the outside, and sometimes even from the inside, it's very hard to tell the difference. People who have endured too much often develop a particular relationship with self-reliance. Because when you've needed help and it didn't come, or when asking for help made things worse, your brain logs that experience. It files it under, don't depend on others, handle it yourself, stay small, stay quiet, keep moving. This isn't weakness. It's a deeply logical adaptation to an environment where depending on others felt risky or unreliable. But this pattern comes with a cost, and this is where it gets worth pausing on. Think about someone you know, or maybe yourself, who seems to carry everything alone, who deflects concern when people offer it, who finds it genuinely difficult to receive care, even when it's offered sincerely. There's a well-documented psychological phenomenon where the very people who most need connection find it the hardest to accept, because connection requires vulnerability, and vulnerability, for someone who has been through a great deal, has often been the thing that got them hurt. Attachment researchers call this pattern insecure avoidant attachment. It's not coldness, it's not indifference, it's a protective strategy the nervous system adopted, often very early in life. To manage an environment that felt unpredictable or unsafe, the brain learned, if I don't need anything from anyone, I can't be let down. What's equally important to understand is what endurance does to a person's sense of identity. When you've survived a lot, it quietly becomes part of how you define yourself. Your capacity to endure becomes the thing you trust most about yourself. And that can be genuinely powerful. But it can also create a subtle trap where rest feels like weakness, where slowing down triggers anxiety, where the absence of struggle feels almost wrong. Some people who have endured too much unconsciously recreate difficulty, not because they want to suffer, but because their nervous system has calibrated difficulty as normal. Calm, paradoxically, can feel like a threat. Psychologists sometimes describe this as a dysregulated baseline, where the body is so accustomed to high levels of cortisol and adrenaline that peace feels unfamiliar, strange, even suspicious. And yet, and this is the part worth sitting with, people who have carried tremendous amounts are often among the most perceptive, most empathetic, most quietly wise individuals you will ever meet. There is something that develops through sustained difficulty, a kind of emotional intelligence that can't really be taught, an understanding of human fragility, a patience for other people's pain, a capacity to stay steady when the ground shifts. The research on post-traumatic growth, the psychological phenomenon where people emerge from hardship with deeper meaning, stronger values, and a richer sense of self, suggests that endurance, when it's processed rather than buried, can genuinely reshape a person in profound ways. The key word, of course, is processed. Not suppressed, not performed, but actually worked through, ideally with the support of someone safe. So, the next time you encounter someone who seems impossibly composed, who deflects your concern with a quiet smile and a "I'm fine," consider what that composure might actually represent. Not the absence of feeling, not emotional strength in its purest form, but a nervous system that learned, very carefully, to carry weight without showing it. And if any of this resonates with something you recognize in yourself, that tendency to absorb rather than express, to keep moving rather than rest, to handle rather than lean, it might be worth asking a simple question. What would it feel like to let something be someone else's problem for once? Not because you can't carry it, but because you don't have to. Human behavior is rarely what it looks like from the outside, and the people who seem the most unbreakable are often the ones most quietly in need of someone who notices.